I had only just returned to my bunk and was sitting on the bed staring at the wall when there was a knock on my door. Spaceship quarters did not appear to have doorbells. I opened it and saw Captain Quassel standing outside.
"May I come in?"
I stood aside to let her in, and she closed the door behind her. Her huge form seemed silly in my cabin, but she appeared self-conscious. She lowered herself into my single chair, and I sat on the bed. When I looked up at her, I saw the dim number above her head was now a 44. I gestured towards her number. "Congratulations." She waggled her trunk.
"At my age, leveling is less significant than it used to be, and the new level comes at too high a price."
"I suppose it does," I agreed.
"I wanted to talk to you more about what happened today."
"Are you angry with me?"
"For saving my crew and ship?"
she asked.
"Hardly, but you are now caught up in a political mess, so there are things that you ought to know. Things I could not say at the meeting."
"Who are the Fads?" I asked, before she could say anything I didn't want to hear. "Why did they kill those Granari?" She moved her trunk in little circles as she spoke.
"Like the Confederation, their empire consists of many worlds and contains many species, but the highest levels of government are open only to one species, the Fads. They that have reached out to the stars and explored, expanded, exploited, and, I fear, exterminated."
I've enjoyed my share of 4X games, but I thought it best not to bring that up just now.
"Like the beings of the Confederation, the Fads have built on and expanded upon former technology and designs, though they have put their creative endeavors into developing weaponry, while we have concentrated on shielding and sensors. It is our first priority in any engagement that one of our ships must never fall into enemy hands, just as they have similar orders. If we could duplicate their weapons, or if they could understand our sensors and shielding, one side would dominate the other in a matter of weeks. We could liberate their conquered worlds, or they would exterminate us and take the Confederation Central for themselves. It is the most sophisticated function example of former tech known to exist, and they would do anything to possess it."
"But they cracked your shielding," I said. "Does that mean the Confederation is in serious trouble?"
"No," she said. "This happens once or twice a decade. We improve and they improve. The data from the attack will be analyzed closely, and adjustments will be made to all shielding. It was a temporary advantage and won't change much."
"If this were a one-time advantage, why wouldn't they save it for a more important battle?"
"That is a very good question," she said. "Maybe they thought we wouldn't survive or be able to transmit data to the Confederation. But that isn't a satisfying answer. The truth is all evidence points to this having been a top priority mission for them."
"Great. Killing us was on the top of their list."
"Zeke," the captain said, her voice now unmistakably serious, "they had us. In another few minutes they would have launched the Dependable. I could never willingly let them capture a Confederation ship. If it had been in my power, I would have destroyed the vessel first. But there weren't enough of the bridge crew conscious to activate the destruct mechanism, so you must understand that, at the very least, you saved our lives. But you may have saved the entire Confederation."
I stared at her. I didn't feel like a hero, and I didn't particularly want to be one, but I did relish her point that I hadn't done anything wrong. "I just didn't want us to get killed," I said.
"I know that, Zeke. The fact that we almost lost the war can't become public knowledge, but it was important to me that you hear it. The appropriate councils will know the truth. I know the truth, and though he lacks the clearance, I told Dr. Roop."
There was something about how she said his name. "Are you two—" I waved my hand in the air.
"Why?" she asked. "Do you think he's too young for me?"
"I think he's kind of tall for you." She laughed.
"I like tall beings."
Then, more seriously,
"I trust him, and you should too. I don't know that you can trust anyone else, so please be careful when you get to the station."
I bit back my fear and my sadness, because There was something else I had to know. I didn't want to know, and I could have just tried to forget it, but I somehow knew the answer would catch me up. I somehow knew the answer would catch up to me, and I'd rather hear it when I was braced than have it take me by surprise. "How many?" I asked. "How many were on that ship?"
"I can't say for certain,"
she said. Her voice was filled with gentle sadness, though I didn't know if it was for the Fads or for me.
"A Stonefist-classed Fadic cruiser has a standard complement of 30 to 35.
I nodded. "I killed between 30 and 35 beings. Now I knew."
"Did you want to kill them?"
she said.
"Do their deaths give you pleasure?"
I shook my head. "No," I whispered, in case my gesture didn't translate. "But I didn't follow the rules, did I? If Urch had done what I did, would he be in trouble?"
"He is a trained officer," she said. "He is bound by the regulations. I chose to put you at the weapons console, and if anyone is going to answer for what happened today, it will be me."
"I can't ask you to do that," I said.
"It's not about doing you a favor. It is the truth. I had no choice but to do what I did, and I don't regret it. Neither should you. Learn from what happened, but don't condemn yourself for doing the best that you could."
She stood now, and when I stood, she put a hand on my shoulder.
"I had a son, Zeke, in the exploration services. He was lost while investigating a possible former outpost. We think it was a Fadic raid, but we can't be certain." I had imagined more than a hint of sadness in those huge and widely spaced eyes. Now I knew why. "I'm sorry," I told her. There was nothing else to say. I knew a thing or two about loss, and I hoped that would come across. "Forgive me if I'm a little mothering towards you. You remind me of him. You don't exactly look like him, but there's something there."
She wrapped her thick arms around me and took me into a massive hug. Her body was hard. It was like hugging a piece of furniture, but her touch was gentle, and she smelled like leather and cinnamon. When she let me go, she said,
"I hope you don't mind."
"No, I don't mind at all," I said, feeling a little teary. The captain's affection made me feel good, and made me think about my mother, and how she must be suffering right now, not knowing what was happening to me, dealing with the fact that she wouldn't hear from me for another year.
"I have a lot to attend to, but if you need anything, message me."
I nodded. She opened the door and stepped into the hall.
"Fortune favors the bold,"
she said.
"For your sake, I hope you're right. For the Confederation's, I pray that you're wrong."
I awoke just before 6 in the morning, ship's time, to the now recognizable lurching sensation of emerging from a tunnel. As soon as we returned to regular space, my view screen reappeared on the wall, composing itself out of what had looked like ordinary plastic seconds before. I sat up quickly and got my first look at the capital of the Confederation. The station orbited a gas giant, much like Saturn, with its rings and multiple moons. I counted 5 currently visible, which meant there were likely more on the far side. The planet was stunning, a mix of deep blues and brilliant reds and ominous grays swirling in clouds of mysterious gas. It was unspeakably beautiful, and the only thing that could have made me look away was the station itself. It was a massive disk, silver and glowing with lights. On the top, a clear dome arose over more than 3/4 of the surface, though we were at a great distance. I could see buildings inside the dome, whole neighborhoods separated by complex rail systems or huge clumps of vegetation and artificial bodies of water. Above it all hovered actual cloud formations. On the fringes were huge patches of what looked like forests, mountains, and deserts. I was expecting Babylon 5 or Deep Space Nine, but this was something else entirely. This was a continent in space, and at its center, a massive city. As we drew closer, I was struck by the sight of the ships in orbit, several of them significantly larger than the Dependable. Urch had been right about that. The size and design left no doubt that these were battleships, and they appeared far more suited to take on one of the monstrous Fandic flyer saucers than we had been. Many of the ships were blackened and scarred and broken like they'd seen combat. The ugly welts and scars and burns implied that they'd been losers. Maybe the fact that the ships had survived spoke to their success, and maybe they'd come to the station for repairs, but looking at the collection of blasted and hobbled vessels made me worry that I'd antagonized the winning side of a nasty war. Only after I'd spent more than an hour staring out the window did I notice that there was a message waiting for me on my data bracelet. I opened up the communications quay and tagged the only thing in my inbox. It displayed about 1.5 feet before my eyes in blue letters against a white holographic projection. It read, "The rest of the delegation doesn't want me to speak with you, and I understand, and agree with their reasons. Nevertheless, you saved our lives, and it would be wrong not to thank you for your courage. I will forever be grateful, but please don't indicate that we've been in contact from the others. Nyana." It was a good thing she signed off with her last name, otherwise I'd have no idea which Nyana had sent this. I snorted a laugh as I thought about how lame the thank you was. I also thought that, compared to the other humans, it was a real class act. Dr. Roop contacted me through my data bracelet to tell me to pack my bag and report to the shuttle bay in half an hour. When I arrived, the other humans were already there. The captain and some of her crew, including Urch and Yistip, also arrived to see us off. Urch jutted out his jaw and showed me his teeth. "Show no mercy to your enemies." "I'll feast on their bowels," I told him. Metaphorically, of course.
"Probably best that way."
The captain wrapped her arms around me, gave me a hug, and then pressed the tip of her trunk to my cheek.
"Be careful,"
she said, and then, perhaps thinking she didn't want to freak me out too much,
"I know you'll do well."
"Will I see you again?" I asked.
"I come by the station 3 or 4 times a year. I promise to visit next time I'm here."
We then climbed onto the shuttle and headed over to Confederation Central to begin our careers as initiates. Crazy as it seemed, we hadn't even started yet.